The honourable member for Halifax-Shabukto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to direct just a few quite short comments to this piece of legislation. And the main thing I want to say about it is that whoever invented the word posturing must have had something very close to Bill 185 in mind. I would like, in fact, to introduce and table some dictionary definitions of the word posturing. The Oxford English Dictionary: posturing, acting in an artificial or affected manner, posing for effect, adopting a certain attitude so as to impress. Chambers English Dictionary: posturing, to pose for effect. Webster's: posturing, assuming an artificial or pretended attitude, as in, and these are Webster's words, Mr. Speaker, not mine, as in posturing as the friend of the oppressed, quote, unquote. I don't, however, think we need a dictionary to provide us illustrations of what it means to posture. About as vivid and precise an example of posturing as you could ask for is being provided in the government's response to the report of the Remuneration Review Panel. So the panel reports its findings on the morning of July 19th, whereupon the House is convened to overturn the panel's recommendations, and the convening is accompanied by these very carefully chosen Premier's office words, which I will table. Quote, "When inflation's at a 40-year high, gas prices are at historic levels, and many hard-working Nova Scotians are struggling to make ends meet, it is not the time to increase the pay of MLAs," said the Premier in the news release, which then continued, "As soon as I learned about the proposed raise, I took immediate action to stop it," unquote. So we are reminded here of the familiar nesting behavior of the partridge. The partridge. Many who are familiar at all with the woods will be aware that the partridge, when you startle it and interrupt it and come upon it by surprise in the woods in its roost, immediately moves away from the roost and unfurls its wings as big as it can and flaps them as hard as it can, while it kicks the dirt and makes as many sounds as it can while it's kicking the dirt and flapping its wings, and the partridge does this.
Order, please. That was quite the demonstration, but I don't think it really applies to the bill. The honourable member for Halifax-Shabukto.
Thank you. In this way, Mr. Speaker, I think you might think that it is reasonable to think it applies to say that the partridge does all of this performance in order to accomplish two objects in Mother Nature. One, to make itself appear other than what it is. And two, in order to divert attention from the thing that the partridge wants the attention diverted from. So, here, Mr. Speaker, is the government's partridge-ish diversion. 6 weeks ago, on June 2nd, in the midst of what the Premier precisely describes as 40-year high inflation, in which hard-working Nova Scotians are struggling to make ends meet, the Premier and the Minister of Finance announced, I will table the coverage of the announcement, they announced that contrary to what they had indicated a couple of weeks before, Nova Scotia would not be joining the many provinces that are taking actual concrete measures to provide people directly with relief in consideration of the sudden dramatic escalation of the cost of living, with the result that Nova Scotia became the only province in eastern Canada where some form of direct income supplement is not being offered in the current income crisis by the government of the province. So there would be no gas tax relief, as in BC, no accelerated increases in the minimum wage, as in Newfoundland and Labrador, no tying income assistance to inflation, as in New Brunswick, no direct transfers, as in Quebec or in PEI, and as we in the NDP have called for here in Nova Scotia. No, in fact, Mr. Speaker, no, nothing. Except for the Finance Minister's comforting words, which I have already tabled, that he said, we're going to continue to monitor the situation. We're continuing to monitor the situation.
Order, please.
Yeah.
Once again, Mr. MLA, I have to interject because we're straying from the intent of Bill 185. The honourable member for Halifax-Shabukton.
I will say only then, Mr. Speaker, as briefly as I can, that what is continuing to be monitored, and this is the matter that Premier Partridge is wishing to create the diversion from.
Order, please. I'm going to ask the member to withdraw that statement. The honourable member for Halifax-Shabukton, can you withdraw when your mic is on?
Yes, I do withdraw that statement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Returning then to the idea about continuing to monitor. So what's being monitored? What's being monitored is a situation which the member for Dartmouth North spoke to eloquently a few moments ago, a situation in Nova Scotia today in which we have more food banks than we have Tim Hortons. We're monitoring a situation where we got more food banks than we have McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King's -- 2, all put together. That's the situation that's being monitored. The situation where, as the member said earlier, our food insecurity is the worst of any province in Canada, which we've seen reflected in these recent sad days where for the first time in Nova Scotia we see uniformed police officers standing in our grocery stores. So how convenient, Mr. Speaker, in this situation, that within a few short weeks of the government having made exactly all of this their chosen path and their chosen position, how convenient that the Remuneration Review Panel should be bringing forward its report, providing the Premier with an opportunity to flap, 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 kick, 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 hiss, squawk, squawk, and hiss about what I did immediately as soon as I learned about the proposed raises, flap, squawk, hiss. Mr. Speaker, if there were an Olympics for posturing, the Premier should take the podium with this bill in his hand and be presented with the golden partridge. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.